Hello and welcome to our first Women in Government Contracting podcast of 2022. I'm Tracye Howard, a partner in Wiley's Government Contracts Practice Group, and I'm joined today by my partner, Sacilotto, and our distinguished guest, Edda Emmanuelli Perez, who is the General Counsel of the U.S. Government Accountability Office. As background, Wiley started the Women in Government Contracts Group in 2014 so that women in the government contracting industry had opportunities for networking, mentoring, knowledge sharing, and professional growth. We've previously held mostly in-person events ranging from Q&As with notable leaders in the industry to community service-oriented and just networking events. We've pivoted to having a mix of podcasts, substantive virtual panels, and we hope in the future to have some in-person events, hopefully at our new offices on 2050 M Street. Before we get started, I wanted to take a moment to extend our sincere appreciation to Ralph White. He's one of GAO's managing associate general counsels for procurement law, and he facilitated us being able to do this discussion and getting all the internal approvals at GAO, and we are very grateful to Ralph. So with that, welcome, Edda, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I really appreciate being here today.
So Edda, based on our previous conversations as we were preparing, I know that your GAO bio doesn't really do you justice and doesn't capture the great breadth of experience that you have there. Can you just give us a little bit of background on yourself and your time at GAO?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I grew up in Puerto Rico and I went to college there, and probably like many attorneys, I have that bachelor's degree in history and in English. So a lot of language and reading there. Then I came to DC in 1984 to go to Georgetown Law School. And then I stayed, obviously. So when I was in law school, I was able to work in a couple of legal offices and some internships in the government, including working as a summer associate at GAO. And of course, GAO stands for Government Accountability Office. So, for those of you who might not know that, so in that summer associate program, I really had the opportunity to try a couple of different subject matter areas. And it really was a great summer for me. And one of the things I really enjoyed was sort of how much variety GAO had. So after that summer, I actually worked part-time as a student intern, a law intern in the procurement law section. So spent a few months working on bid protest in those days. And then once I graduated, then of course came full-time to GAO. In terms of my background at GAO, I was able to start off working in our litigation group. So did a lot of litigation, defending personnel type cases, contract cases for the agency, as well as providing internal legal advice on operations and other, personnel type matters for GAO, as well as budget. So I spent about 7 or 8 years doing that. And then I thought I wanted to try something different. And again, I think because GAO offers so many different issues that we can work on, I was able to go to working in the legal groups that provide support to our engagement teams. And those are probably some of the typical areas of work that people are familiar with, a lot of our audit work. So it spent a number of years providing legal advice in a lot of different areas. And so was able to work on, healthcare and financial management, financial markets, appropriations law and budgeting, just among the number of areas that GAO offers. After that, then I was, fortunate to be promoted to be a supervisor in a couple of different groups. And, obviously sort of widening the various issues that I was working on. And until I, then was able to become a senior executive in one of our engagement teams, as well as working then later on as our deputy general counsel and now more recently as general counsel. So I've covered a lot of different subject matters, as well as just different focus groups in GAO.
So in your role as general counsel, given the breadth that you described of what GAO does, I mean, it does so much. How do you organize the general counsel's office?
Sure. So it's interesting because when you look at, the office and the way it's organized, there are probably going to be a couple of different areas that, that most people would recognize. So we have a legal services group that is the one that does the litigation and the in-house counsel type work. So that probably is going to be a familiar type of organization for many people. And then, of course, we have our procurement law group, which I know a lot of people are familiar with. So there we have, of course, the attorneys working on those bid protests, dealing with the award of contract. Similarly, then on another area of our office, we have our appropriations law group. And that's a group that issues the decisions as well as providing support and advice and assistance to Congress on the use of appropriated funds. So looking at how we use appropriated funds, how do agencies use them, what are maybe some of the limitations that they have, and really reporting to Congress then on issues such as the Anti-Deficiency Act and other fiscal laws. We then have a large area of the office that provides what I'll call to be engagement counsel work. So what does that mean? Because again, that may not sound familiar to people in these other practices. So what those attorneys do is they work with those audit teams and that are doing, those reviews of agency programs and really providing the legal background, like what are the laws and regulations that apply to particular programs? What do agencies have to follow? How do they comply with these laws and regulations? And then really assisting those audit teams in identifying, the findings of, what the audit has in terms of efficiency, improvements, and making recommendations to agencies. So the attorneys are really involved with those teams in really all aspects of those jobs. And that's a, pretty large area of our office. And then we also have attorneys who provide assistance to our internal Opportunity and Inclusiveness group. And that is really similar to the Equal Employment Opportunity or EEO type practice, providing advice on those various issues involving EEO, as well as another group that works on ethics, looking at financial disclosure, conflict of interest issues, and making sure that we are at GAO maintaining an independent and nonpartisan way to do our work. So it's a pretty broad area of the office. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we also have a very strong group of operations employees, including our paralegals, our executive assistants, and those managers who provide really critical support to all of our attorneys.
So of the attorneys who work in your office, do they have different client constituencies? Who are the clients of the various organizations within that you all serve?
Sure. No, absolutely. And we do actually think of it as client support. We talk about it as client support. And that is, so for example, with those attorneys who do the engagement support, because GAO is divided up into mission teams that have various areas of expertise and issues that they cover in agencies that they audit, we have a team of attorneys that's dedicated to each one of those mission teams. So let me give you an example. We have a healthcare team that does, as you can imagine right now, very busy with the CARES Act work. But prior to that, always working on Medicare, Medicaid, Affordable Care Act issues, all sorts of issues dealing with healthcare. So we do have a group of attorneys that's dedicated to that particular mission team. And they're, the attorneys, again, they will have expertise in a number of areas that they can then, leverage to assist those auditors and those analysts in conducting those programs. So that's where I would say those healthcare attorneys, their clients initially is that mission team at GAO that they work with. But ultimately, our client is going to be the Congress, right? Because we work for the Congress. Our role is to provide Congress with what it needs to carry out its functions. And then obviously the public. We issue our reports, we issue decisions, and all of those are ones that are intended not only for Congress, but for really the public to have information on how the federal government is working.
Wow, that's a lot. How many attorneys are in your office right now, roughly?
Sure. So we have probably about 165 attorneys. And I say about because we have some folks retiring. We're hiring attorneys. So but it's approximately about 165 attorneys. And that includes the supervisors, the direct supervisors, as well as the senior executives that manage the various groups. And then we have about 15 operations staff that really provide all the support for those attorneys.
Wow, that's much larger than I guess I would have thought. But now that we know how many attorneys and the breadth of the mission, you as a general counsel are at kind of at the apex of that. What is a typical week or day like in your job as general counsel of GAO?
Sure. So I really see it as sort of two main roles. One is, of course, heading up the unit that is the Office of General Counsel. And so I'm working with, for example, in my front office, I have, of course, my deputy general counsel, as well as a managing associate general counsel for legal operations. So there we're really working on how do we manage that Office of General Counsel? You know, what type of planning do we need to do for our workforce, for our development of our attorneys, for hiring, for retention, all of the aspects of managing a legal office. And then I also have, direct, working with the, senior executives who are in charge of the various subject areas. So we meet to talk about the subject matter, talk about what work is pending, and, making sure that, that we have good conversations and review of the work that is, being issued either by the Office of General Counsel or by GAO with any legal issues. So that's really more sort of managing OGC, right? Another part of the job that is involved with being general counsel is being a member of the executive committee at GAO. So we have the head of our agency, our comptroller general, our chief operating officer, and we have a chief administrative officer as well. And so the general counsel forms part of that executive committee. And so there, in addition to bringing sort of all the legal advice and support that the executive committee and GAO needs, also then assisting in, helping develop the policies and leading, the agency as part of that executive team. So it's really kind of a combination of those two things that I'm doing every day.
That executive team that you mentioned, it sounds, would it be, you liken it to like a board of directors?
That's probably a good way of putting it. Yes, it really is. So for example, the chief administrative officer is in charge of, GAO's budget and making sure that we're meeting all of our appropriations and budget requirements, our personnel requirements. Our chief operating officer is the one that is really, providing the leadership and oversight for our mission teams and all of that audit and engagement work. Of course, our comptroller general, as the head of our agency, provides the leadership on all of those areas. So it really is probably, similar to a board of directors and really being able to make sure that the agency is meeting its mission, fulfilling, what we need to fulfill for the Congress, and really following, our strategic plan in terms of the work that we need to accomplish for Congress and for the public.
Mm-hmm. And so how do you go about, and I don't know if there's one way of going about this, but you have attorneys who are focused on, for example, the healthcare side of the engagement. And I would imagine that there are attorneys who serve maybe a defense team or aerospace. But then you have the whole procurement law division and the whole appropriation side. How do you go about ensuring that your office can meet all of those very different, sometimes very niche expertises?
Right. No, absolutely. That really is one of the challenges of managing an office that has such a diverse set of issues, because we constantly have to be looking at the workload, within the general counsel's office, for example, for legal decisions, for like the bid protest. Like, do we have enough attorneys to be able to maintain all of that workload? And, the same thing goes with, providing legal support to our audit teams. So what we do there is we have really a sort of a workforce plan that we look at in terms of looking at, the levels of work in each area, what we anticipate is coming down the road, and making sure then that we can say, okay, where do we need to build up some expertise? So for example, in the past couple of years, as everyone might understand, there are a lot of cybersecurity issues that come up, and definitely a lot of legal issues arising with things like cybersecurity and privacy. So that's an area where we're looking to say, okay, we need some additional legal expertise there. How do we have training, we have, mentoring for the current attorneys we have. And then we also are going to, we'll go out and look for, to hire people who have expertise, either in other agencies or in the private sector on that subject matter. And so we'll do the same thing for all of those issue areas. It's kind of always balancing and trying to figure out, okay, where are the needs? Where do we see maybe people who might be retiring or people who need to sort of pass on the expertise and knowledge that they have? and trying to balance that. And of course, that's never going to be a perfect, sort of a perfect science to doing that. But we think that if we have, good succession planning, internal training, external training, as well as that mentoring and on-the-job training, that really helps us develop that expertise. And of course, I think like I'm sure many people will appreciate, sometimes you just have to sit down with that subject matter yourself and you have to study it and really learn it, ask questions and practice it and make mistakes sometimes, right? And just really try to figure out the area. So I think there's a whole, combination there individually and as an office that we use.
So I know you've given us an overview of the huge variety of things that go on in your office. Are there any things that you and your colleagues do that the public might not be as aware about or that you would want people to know more about, since some of these are kind of niche areas?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the areas that are not going to be necessarily public involve a lot of the what I call technical assistance, or we call it technical assistance at GAO. And that is when we're able to, mainly working with the Congress, and being able to provide our expertise to Congress and to the staff, is, providing not necessarily a product that we're issuing, but looking at our existing work or looking at existing decisions, for example, to be able to talk through, particular issues or areas that they're focusing on and giving them that background, giving them some good areas for them to look at either when they're doing legislative drafting or oversight hearings or work that they might be interested in requesting us to do. So there's a lot of sort of behind the scenes in terms of working with the Congress. There's also legislative drafting that we do or helping, review legislation that the Congress is working on. And again, that's something that we're doing directly with them as our clients, helping either with work that we've conducted. And so we're able to kind of leverage that knowledge and providing, legislative options for them as they're making those policy decisions. And then there's also a lot of teaching that we do. And that has been, I think, a really great part. I know for me, I taught the appropriations law course for many years. It's one that we teach for federal agencies. We teach it for the Congress as well. And we have, various speaking opportunities for our attorneys. And as you all might be aware, of course, our procurement law attorneys also have, many speaking engagements within agencies for the Congress, as well as for procurement law community and other entities. So those are areas where I think we're able to, bring, some of that expertise and knowledge, more publicly.
Well, it's very generous of, we know mostly the GAO attorneys who do procurement law, and they do very generously give their time to the community by often speaking and participating at, for example, ABA public contract law programs and committee meetings. And it's really helpful to have them participate because, at least in that forum, and certainly in a very small government contracts bar, we're going to run across each other all the time, and to hear directly from the agency and have them be active participants in the procurement system. I think everybody's ultimate goal is to make the procurement system work well.
Right.
And so I thank you and thank them for doing that. And so now I'm going to pivot to something that is related to what the procurement law division of your office does. And that's they handle the bid protests. And every time that we get a published decision, every day they're coming across our feed and your name is on every decision that is published that comes out. And I'm given the breadth of the topics that you cover, how do you manage that part of your job of the procurement law division GAO bid protest decisions?
Sure. So definitely as general counsel, I'm responsible for ensuring, the legal sufficiency and the quality of all of those decisions, because they are, in fact, my name is on them, but they are, in fact, of course, decisions of the Comptroller General. So at GAO, what you'll learn is we definitely have a very rigorous review process. So in terms of having layers of review, having editing. We have discussions about the issues in all of the different contexts of these decisions, just to ensure that, we're all on the same page in terms of what are decisions that we're making? What are these, issues that are coming before us? And so I definitely work with all of those, procurement law attorneys and those managers in terms of reviewing what those decisions are and ensuring that they meet that quality review, and then of course I provide my comments, I provide my review as well as we get those issued. So we have a pretty rigorous review process for all of that.
So Edda, you described your role doing reports at the request of Congress and also advising Congress on matters. But your role at GAO also involves interacting with the executive branch and the administration. How do you handle the intersection of those two constituencies?
Sure. So it's interesting because I think that, there are times when we think about doing some of those engagements and coming to the agencies, that of course, we're going to have findings, we're going to have recommendations. And so sometimes a lot of what we're doing is trying to have some initial, meetings with the agencies or the program officials, just to make sure that we understand how that program works, understand that context, and that we really are trying to, provide, good recommendations and assessments of, how those programs work, and really to make them more effective, make them more efficient, and to save federal dollars. So, but that can be tricky sometimes because, again, obviously if you're a program official, you might be concerned, oh no, are you going to come in to criticize everything I'm doing here? So we definitely do try to work closely with agencies to ensure that they understand what our process is, understand, what the scope of our engagements are going to be, and that the types of recommendations and findings that we're making are really intended to be helpful to the program moving forward. Now, of course, we're doing this work for the Congress, as you noted. And so some of that will be, again, being able to make sure that we're giving Congress really the full breadth of what's happening in a program. Sometimes, Congress will have heard of certain problems or certain potential issues in a program. And so our role is to make sure that they have the full information and that we're able to give them, really fact-based findings and recommendations so that then Congress can make some policy, decisions moving forward. So it's really, intended to be something where we work well with the agencies while everyone understands that obviously we are going to have recommendations for improvement. That's something that we do try to work in having some good relationships established.
So shifting gears a little from your position in the General Counsel's office, we wanted to talk a little bit about your time as the Managing Director for Opportunity and Inclusiveness. Of course, diversity, equity, and inclusion is an area of significant focus across the legal industry these days. And so we wanted to hear from you about your experience in that position and the role of that office more generally.
Sure. So I was, had quite a bit of experience working on litigation, dealing with EEO issues, and after that, also working as a manager in OGC and GAO on diversity, equity, inclusion. And we've also now added accessibility because that's obviously an important part of this conversation. I did have the opportunity when we had a managing director for that office that was retiring. So I was asked to step in for, it was maybe about a year and a few months, about a year and a half maybe, to step in and really lead that office as we were looking for another person to assume that leadership. And so it was actually a really interesting and exciting role for me to take on because it was, I wasn't coming into it as an attorney for GAO, even though having the law degree was very important. Because what that Opportunity Inclusiveness office is, it's really GAO's EEO office. So it handles the complaints that come from employees or from applicants, for example, on various EEO issues. The office also advises the agency on other EEO issues in terms of looking at, ensuring that programs are carried out in, the most effective as well as the most effective and legal manner in terms of all the EEO issues. And then finally, it also has mediation services as well as other services for employees and managers, to be able to address those issues as they come up. One of the key areas that we developed during that time was establishing really the beginning of an anti-harassment program. So while I was there, we started doing, having more ability to conduct investigations if there were any harassment type of allegations. And that's something that we really started to develop at that time, really in order to make sure that we could find a way to, if anyone raised an issue, that we could quickly address it, like find out what's happening, put a stop to any problems that might be occurring, and just really give both employees and managers a place to, be able to address those types of issues. So it was really, for me, it was really a great opportunity to kind of put into practice a lot of the EEO type experience that I had, and really try to establish, the parameters for that office moving forward. The person who has succeeded me has continued to develop the program and done many more things than what I was able to accomplish in that time. But it was really, for me, it was just a really important way to show how GAO really values that diversity and inclusion, and how much we really emphasize what we call our people values. In our people values, we always explain that we have a focus on making sure that every employee is valued, respected, and treated fairly. And so obviously having that as part of the values that underlie GAO is, having the DE&I program, be a significant part of that process was really important. I enjoyed the experience, but I did, of course, want to come back to OGC. So was lucky to have that experience and then be able to come back to OGC.
Sure. I always want to come back to the legal office.
Yeah, absolutely.
So maybe you can talk a little bit about sort of diversity, equity, and inclusion at GAO. And I'm guessing you might have more perspective on that from your role in the executive committee than, per se as a general counsel, but, whatever you know about that.
Sure. So, I really think of it as, broader than the legal perspective. Because of course, as an employer, as part of the federal government, we of course, have to follow and and are very committed to making sure that we're following all of the EEO laws, right? The laws and regulations, et cetera. But we really kind of look at this from that perspective of those people values. And that is that, making sure that in addition to following those laws, in addition to ensuring that we operate free of discrimination and provide opportunities for all, also is making sure that employees feel that they are being valued and respected. And so part of that DEI journey, one of the things that our Comptroller General has done, in addition to, of course, a longstanding, having the O&I office, longstanding office at GAO, he's also established an office that reports to the executive committee, to the front of GAO, providing a diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. So we have a senior executive who works generally on that as well, implements a strategic plan for diversity, inclusion, and accessibility and equity, right? And so identifying all of the areas that you have in an agency, looking at, our recruitment, looking at our retention, our promotions, looking at opportunities for staff. What are the different ways that staff can have opportunities in all of those areas? So it's not only recruiting and trying to maintain a diverse workforce, but then once they're there, how do you keep this staff, motivated, keep this staff feeling that they are being valued? And then finally, in addition, we do, of course, a lot of audit work in the diversity and equity areas. So you'll see some of our audit work looking at various agencies or departments and how they handle a number of these areas. So it really ends up being not only what's internal to GAO in terms of our own people, but then also what advice can we give to agencies on these types of programs. So it's been an area that the Comptroller General has been really passionate about and has really made sure to focus a lot of resources on.
That's great. Well, this is probably one of the reasons why year over year you see, I see it when I go to the GAO website, one of the best places to work in government. And so you would also probably be a very good example of that, having spent your whole career, your legal career, I should say, at GAO. And so why GAO? What has kept you there?
Sure. For me, GAO provided really just a great way to really devote my interest in public service. So I do come from a family of of federal employees. My father was a federal employee. My grandfather was a federal employee. My father-in-law was a federal employee. My husband is a federal employee. So we have a very strong commitment to public service. So I did grow up, wanting to, join the federal government. And that was something that, and one of the reasons why I wanted to come to law school in Washington as well, was knowing that, okay, well, there's the seat of the federal government and there will probably be good opportunities there. The reason I really liked GAO was because of the variety of issues. So I was one of those folks who in law school, I enjoyed many classes, but I wasn't really quite sure exactly which area of law I was going to focus on. I know some people have a very specific area of law that they go into, but I really was thinking to myself, okay, I want to have some variety. And so when I was able to get the opportunity to come to GAO for that summer, that was one of the things that I really liked, was there were so many issue areas. And that GAO, if there's something in the news, if there's something that's happening that's an important policy that we need to consider, GAO is probably doing some work on that. And so that really interested me. Once I started full time, I enjoyed the fact that I was able to develop, in various areas. I did have, a lot of good opportunities, people who really, took the time to mentor me, took the time to give me, chance to do different types of work, to learn different areas. And then the work-life balance was very important to me. And that was something that GAO as well has emphasized. And obviously that's never a perfect area for anyone, but I did feel that GAO and the people that I worked with really they demonstrated that they were trying to have a work-life balance. And so that made me, comfortable that I could do that as well, because it was important to me. I wanted to have a career, but I wanted to have a family. And so, I was able to do both of those. And then really for me, finally, it was the people. I've made just lifelong friendships, colleagues who care about each other, who are willing to share their expertise. And so for me, it was interesting and it was fun to know that I could go into the office every day and there were always going to be people who were going to be generous with their time and their knowledge. And that was definitely something that has kept me there. There have been lots of challenges. Some days have been very tough, like any job, but I think overall, the experience for me has been really very exciting.
I think this might be possibly the best recruiting vehicle that you could send out. Hey, Washington, D.C. area law students, check out GAO, especially if you don't know what you want to do with your career and are looking for a work-life balance. Well, thank you very much, Edda Emmanuelli Perez, General Counsel of the Government Accountability Office, for joining us today. It's been an honor and a pleasure. And again, reiterate our thanks to Ralph White for helping us arrange this. We've enjoyed this tremendously and want to thank both of you for your time and sharing your experiences with us. Going forward, to anyone who's interested, we will be hopefully doing more podcasts and looking forward to maybe doing some webinars on substantive areas of law that are hot in the press. And as Tracye indicated, maybe soon in 2022, we'll be able to gather again in person at 2050 M Street. So with that, I'll sign off. Thank you.
Thank you very much.